Hey there, curious minds, and welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're really digging into something pretty significant. We're looking at the complex and, let's face it, often volatile tensions between the Islamic Republic of Iran, the United States, and Israel. And we're tackling this critical global flashpoint through a specific lens, the United Nations. Our guide is a really insightful analysis called Safeguarding Peace and Upholding International Law, the United Nations perspective on U.S., Israeli, and Iranian tensions. So our mission here is basically to pull out the most important nuggets, the key insights from this UN perspective. We want to give you a clear, concise understanding, kind of a shortcut to being well-informed on this.
Absolutely. And, understanding the UN's framework here, it's not just academic. It's really key to grasping the wider implications of these tensions. It shows how these international norms actually play out or sometimes clash with, national interests on the ground.
Okay, so let's kick off with the UN's overall view. They're understandably deeply concerned about what's been happening. We're talking military strikes, covert ops, sanctions, the constant threats of escalation.
Right.
And the UN sees these not just as isolated incidents, but as serious risks to regional stability, global security, and that whole rules-based international order we hear about.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is that the UN's position, it isn't just plucked out of thin air. It's firmly rooted in the principles of the UN Charter itself. Things like respect for sovereignty, non-aggression, peaceful resolution of disputes, and really crucially, upholding international law. That's the bedrock.
So it follows then that the UN is calling urgently for a shift, right, towards dialogue, diplomacy, de-escalation.
Yeah.
But okay, let's unpack this a bit. What does the UN actually count as a violation of these principles? How broad is their definition of force, for example?
Well, the Charter, specifically Article 2.4, lays it out pretty clearly. Member states have to refrain from the threat or use of force against another state's territorial integrity or political independence. Practically speaking, this means any military action that doesn't have explicit UN Security Council authorization is, it's illegal. Unless, and this is a key caveat, unless it's clearly self-defense under Article 51. It's a high threshold.
Right. And it's not just missiles and tanks, is it?
Yeah.
The UN points out that other kinds of force need scrutiny, too. Things like direct airstrikes, targeted assassinations, even cyber attacks.
Yes, cyber attacks, definitely. And also certain kinds of economic sanctions, especially if the intent is clearly to destabilize a state. It's a much broader picture than just conventional warfare.
Okay.
And based on these principles, the UN has quite specific viewpoints on the parties involved. For Iran, it emphasizes that its sovereignty must be respected. And also, it's right, under the NPT, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, to pursue peaceful nuclear energy. For Israel, the UN acknowledges its legitimate security concerns, regarding hostile non-state actors, regional threats. Those are seen as valid points.
Okay.
And for the United States, as a P5 member, a permanent member of the Security Council, there's a unique responsibility highlighted. They're expected to uphold the multilateral order, not undermine it.
Here's where it gets really interesting, I think. You see the UN performing this incredible balancing act, acknowledging the very real security worries and national rights each country puts forward.
Right.
While simultaneously sticking to these core principles of international law that are supposed to apply to everyone. How do they even navigate that? It seems incredibly tricky.
It's a constant challenge, absolutely, because they're not just, stating legal facts in a vacuum. They're actively trying to find pathways where legitimate national needs might be met, but without tearing down the very system designed to prevent conflict and chaos. It's about finding common ground within that legal framework, even when the parties are, fundamentally disagreeing.
Okay, let's pivot then. Let's talk about nuclear non-proliferation. It's central to all of this, isn't it?
Yeah.
Our source highlights the UN's strong, continued support for the JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. That deal from 2015 between Iran and the P5+1 countries.
Yes, and there are clear reasons why the JCPOA is seen as so vital, maybe the most effective diplomatic tool we had or have. First, it was specifically designed to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons. Second, it ensures really strict monitoring and verification by the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. That transparency is key.
Right, verification.
Exactly. And third, it was meant to create space, breathing room for broader regional dialogue. It wasn't just about the nuclear file, it was about opening diplomatic doors more widely.
But then came the big setback.
Indeed. The 2018 withdrawal by the U.S. from the deal and then the reimposition of sanctions, that was a huge blow. And the UN has been consistent since then, urging everyone involved to return to full compliance. For Iran, that means rolling back enrichment activities beyond the agreed limits.
Hmm.
And for the U.S., it means lifting those unilateral sanctions that contradict the agreement.
So, given all that back and forth, what's the UN's actual take on the future of nuclear security in the region? Do they see a viable path forward, or is it just stalled?
They definitely still see the JCPOA or something very like it as the best available path, probably the only viable diplomatic path, realistically. They understand the complexities, the deep distrust for sure, but their position is clear. A multilateral, verified agreement is vastly preferable to, well, unchecked proliferation, or even worse, military conflict over the issue.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly to another major UN concern, the risk of wider regional war. This isn't just hypothetical, is it? The UN sees it stemming directly from this cycle of provocation and retaliation we keep seeing.
Exactly. It's like a dangerous feedback loop. Actions by one side trigger responses, sometimes disproportionate responses from another, and it just keeps spiraling. It's incredibly dangerous.
And we've seen actual examples of this.
Oh, absolutely.
You have Iranian responses, say, to Israeli strikes, or U.S. pressure, maybe missile launches, mobilizing proxy groups.
Which then risks drawing in neighboring countries, yeah.
And on the flip side, you have Israeli strikes potentially inside Iran, or actions by Iranian-backed militias targeting U.S. personnel in the region. It's a real powder keg.
And the potential fallout from a major escalation is just enormous. Think about global energy markets, huge disruptions. Think about potentially vast numbers of displaced people and the risk of fueling sectarian and geopolitical conflicts way beyond just Iran, Israel, and the U.S. It ripples outwards.
Yeah, it's a global impact.
Yeah.
And then there's the immediate human cost, which the UN is also very focused on. You mentioned sanctions earlier. The UN points out how these often hit ordinary civilians in Iran the hardest,
Disproportionately, yes.
limiting access to essential things like medicine, food, basic goods. It's not abstract. It affects daily life, health, survival.
Absolutely. And then if we consider military actions, especially near populated areas or, God forbid, near nuclear facilities, the risks are terrifying. Mass casualties, huge displacement, potentially catastrophic environmental damage. Plus, we can't forget the civilians already suffering in places like Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen. Further proxy fighting just adds layer upon layer to their misery.
Such a grim picture.
It really is. And that's why the UN is urgently calling on all sides to exercise maximum restraint, to avoid inflammatory language, and to strictly adhere to international humanitarian law, the laws of war. They're also pushing donor nations, NGOs, humanitarian groups to coordinate relief efforts, to protect the people caught in the middle. It's a full spectrum concern, from high politics down to individual suffering.
So faced with this incredibly precarious situation,
Yeah.
what does the UN propose? How do we get out of this cycle? They seem ready to step in, emphasizing their role in facilitating dialogue, right? Both direct and indirect talks.
Exactly. They position themselves as that neutral platform, and they have some key recommendations. First, reinvigorate the JCPOA framework. The goal isn't just restoring the old deal, but maybe expanding it into a broader regional security agreement eventually.
Okay, yeah, ambitious.
Second, establish a dedicated regional dialogue platform for Gulf security. Importantly, this should include all the regional players plus major international powers. Get everyone in the room.
Makes sense.
Third, strengthen the IAEA's role. Ensure they have the access and support needed for verification. Demand transparency from everyone. And fourth, encourage practical confidence-building measures. Things like mutual non-aggression pledges, maybe reopening diplomatic channels that have been closed. Small steps to build trust.
It sounds like trying to build bridges over very troubled water.
That's a good way to put it. It's painstaking work.
And this really leans into the UN's core identity, doesn't it? That foundational role as a neutral space for nations to hash things out.
That's precisely its unique strength, or potential strength, in situations like this. The UN can offer that space somewhat shielded from direct bilateral pressures. It's all about trying to build trust, even if it's just incremental, through consistent engagement and sticking to those shared principles we talked about.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, the core message from the UN perspective in our source seems really clear. It's this unwavering commitment to peace, to impartiality, and to the sovereignty of nations. and a strong emphasis that these tensions, they're the result of choices made, not some unavoidable destiny.
Yeah, that's a powerful point. It reinforces the idea that a stable, peaceful Middle East, free from the nuclear threat, free from constant militarism and economic coercion, is possible. But, achieving it takes real effort. It requires the courage for diplomacy, the patience for negotiation, and crucially, the political will from all sides to actually uphold international norms. The UN is there as a tool, a platform, if they choose to use it.
So for you, our listener, maybe something to mull over. What really stands out to you about how these principles of international law, the ones the UN champions, could genuinely reshape these complex relationships? And perhaps more practically, what role do you think sustained dialogue, that patient negotiation the UN calls for, can realistically play when the stakes are this high?
Subscribe for more.